Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I have a few clips to show from my, I've copied off the TV, or I have, recorded them on the TV, and I have to record them off of it. Just brief little clips that sort of demonstrate what I'm about to say here. I want to talk about denial as there's personal denial, and then there's collective denial, right? Where you see groups of people denying reality based in whatever issues they have inside of them, that the truth is just too painful, right? The truth or reality as it is just too painful. One of the epic stories in the Mahabharata, there's this, Krishna incarnates as, Vishnu incarnates as Krishna. And Krishna's humanity, his ego, manifests as Arjuna. And Arjuna and Krishna are best friends. And Krishna drives Arjuna's chariot but refuses to use his powers in the war. He has all these divine powers that would make it so that Arjuna's side would easily win, but he agrees to drive the chariot of Arjuna but not pick up any arms in battle, right? And so in the beginning of the Mahabharata, Arjuna's tasked with killing his beloved teacher, the guy who taught him how to be an archer, and his beloved uncle, who's probably kind of like the best person in the book, in the story, in terms of his, just sacrificing and his commitment to being like a good person. And, this guy's name is Bhishma. His teacher's name's Drona. And then he has to kill his cousin and all of his cousins and just all these other people. Like some of the good people, some of the heroes are on the side of the villains. And he can't do it. He can't think about killing these people. And he knows he has to kill all of them because he's the only good archer. And his brothers have different abilities in war, but he's tasked with killing all these people. And he sort of breaks down and cries and throws his bow on the ground and says, I can't do it. So Krishna says, all right, and shows him his divine manifestation, his divine essence. This is Arjuna looking at his own soul. And, it shows just this life and death and eons and just, and the manifestation of destruction and creation and preservation and all these things that, it's like time and eternal time and all this stuff. And he freaks the fuck out and he goes, I'll do whatever you tell me to do, just don't show me that ever again. Right? So, he picks up his bow and he would rather go kill his relatives than have to see his soul in its essence, purest essence. And it's kind of an interesting story because, and something I know to be true, that people are really scared of their divine essence and who they are as a divine being. Like people are more scared of the saint inside of them, the potential saint, than the potential demon. The demon is something that's familiar, and going, to the dark side is a lot easier than embracing your divine nature. So everybody denies reality to some extent. It's everyone's, has their level of what they do in terms of delusional thinking. You have crazy people who hallucinate, and they have delusions of, people have delusions of grandeur. I mean, that's a lot of people, but then some people have a distorted view of reality, and but some of those people see things on a deeper level, even though that they see a world that's a complete illusion or hallucination. They do sometimes have deeper truths than normal people. But over time, and this has happened since people were lured off the farm. I talk about that time when there were tribes and villages of people, and the cities really didn't exist like they do today. And people were, all doing primary labor and engaging with nature and being outdoors, and all food was organic because they hadn't fucked around with chemicals yet. And, people were healthy and natural. And then city life began, and people really started to get fucked in the head, like distorted realities. All these psychological diagnoses started to appear. I mean, there were some genetic things, diseases that never were, didn't exist. And so people were in the cities, and they started to get like really fucked in the head, right? Really just fucked up, all over the body, the head, everything. And people became, more of an abomination than they had ever been before. I mean, it turned into Freakville down here, right? And everybody's a lot more fucked up than we would be if we lived in a more natural, godly-based system. And so if you look at my YouTube channel as something that you could gauge where people are at, right? Like for me, it's, I more or less have read the comments now for, 20-some years? It'll be 20 years in 2027, so 2 years from now. It's been around 18 years. And, for me, if you take me out of the equation, right, like just who I am as a person, like I can understand that for some people I rub them the wrong way, like my personality, whatever. Things I say the way I am, right? But, if you take that out of the equation, there's some people who are not going to like me, but they'll, the information, like this is the information that they get, the information that comes through me and the consciousness and the point of view and these things, right? Which, I believe to be, that part is a real gift. Divinity working through a person being willing to be a conduit, right? And you think about all the things, all the information that comes, into these videos. And probably, there's just some people are just too fucking stupid to understand. But, I do some stupid stuff, right? And there's something on this channel that probably everybody might like a little piece of it, right? Regardless of how they felt about me or, if somebody else presented the information in the same way. That, there'd be almost everybody could find something on this channel that they would agree with or resonate with, right? Because, I say things that are not based in any point of view. Like I don't align with the Christians or align with the liberals or align with the atheists or align with the vegans or align with the flat earthers or align with any number of other groups, the right-wing people, the left-wing people, any of these things. And so I cover a variety of topics. And in that, right, like, there's people who align with the Republicans and they're always going to say only hateful things about Democrats or, these types of things. That, your opinion is already dictated to you because you identify with this group or this thing or that thing. And for me, I don't, I'm much in the moment in these things, right? And so, there's a vast number of people that would agree with something that I say here. And, if you really look at what's going on around you, and I'll cover this a little bit, I'll show a few more clips, but what I've been covering the last, whatever it is, past few years, and specifically since the Trump presidency has happened, I think most people, at least, to some degree, see that we're heading for the fucking cliff. And not because Trump is in charge. That humanity, regardless whether it was Joe Biden in charge or Trump in charge, the Democrats, Republicans, the media, all these people, we're going in the wrong fucking direction, right? Like almost everybody can believe we're going in the wrong fucking direction. Turn around, we're going in the wrong direction. And most people can kind of sense by this point that changing the president or changing, which you watch Fox News instead of MSNBC or watch MSNBC instead of Fox or Newsmax or any of these things that, are the so-called media, or any number of these groups and people isn't going to stop us from going in the wrong direction. Like things have to drastically change on a level that isn't political, that isn't based in the media. Like let's say you take the media and the media is just completely, it's like erased, like it never existed. Like one day you wake up and there's no media at all. No mainstream media. There's no news. And there's no celebrities saying bullshit, and there's no politicians. And in fact, politics are gone. Like the government's just, in terms of politicians, are gone. There's governmental workers, but not politicians. And you get rid of all that shit, right? You get rid of the politicians, the lawyers, the media, the doctors, whatever, all these different, whatever they are, people, whatever these things are. You'd still be going the wrong direction. All of us would be still going in the wrong fucking direction. It wouldn't change. And so, going back to my channel, when I say that we're going in the wrong direction, I think, what do you think? 60% of the people in America could, wrap their mind around that. I mean, let's say just there's 30% that are, smart enough that they can have abstract thought and some of the other concepts that are here. But there's a great number of people that agree we're going in the wrong direction. And more people, I think even Trumpers are realizing that, the people who would identify as a Trumper or Republican realize that Trump isn't going to get people there. There's no Make America Great Again with Trump. I mean, the delusional people that that's the ultimate denial. When the guy's just fucking telling you. He's telling you in every possible way, yeah, I'm a fake, I'm a fraud, and this isn't real. And Make America Great Again isn't going to happen. And, he's not, sometimes he almost says those words and, in some fashion, one way or another. But, still they believe. But, you think about, like, the number of people that can see through that. And I'm not talking about the left-wing people that hate Trump already, but people who, in the truth community, whatever it is, right? And so they call this term being black-pilled. But it's only black-pilled if it isn't true, right? Like, there's no political solution. There's no, you'd have to have massive changes beyond what people are capable of to save this system. People would have to agree to a massive cut in their lifestyle and a total change in orientation of their lives in ways that, nobody would fucking agree to. So, like, that's, what I'm talking about here. It's, that bad, right? And so then you get into the people who really dig the information that's here because they feel there's not really a place that talks about these things the way I talk about them. Maybe, some other channels have some similar views, but, that this really resonates with them. And it's a kind of a, unique channel in that way. And they might not dig the spiritual stuff as much or not, it just doesn't, something they're capable of doing, but there's sort of, they might not like this or that, the other thing, but overall it's like it's 80% of what they kind of want to hear, right? And, I think that maybe there's 10 million people or so, maybe 20, that, would get the spiritual stuff, all these things. They could do the meditation. At least they understand the need for something like that. Understand the idea behind only spirituality will save this world, right? And, all the other things that are presented here. There could be maybe a possible audience of 10 to 20 million people that would, they wouldn't watch every video, but they would at least agree with what's being said here. They're potentially, those people. And that's a lot of people, 10 million people. I don't know what it would be globally. Because again, there's always the language barriers and the cultural barriers, but let's just talk about America here. And so, what I'm saying here is very practical, that we need to change individually. And the only way to really do that is through spirituality. I'm saying this as a person with a master's degree in counseling, and I know counseling works, but not in the kind of way that wholesale changes have to be, administered by a person themselves in their whole orientation towards life. Get rid of all the material dreams and all the, all the stuff, the great American dream, being rich and famous, any of these number of things. The happiness, whatever you're dreaming about as, an ego in terms of what you expect out of life, you'd have to change that. Because the system that would come out of, a collapsed system, like a divine system that would come out of this demonic, beastly system that we have now, your material dreams would not be the same way. Like, you just couldn't go be whatever you wanted to be and do whatever you wanted to do. There'd be so much, different things. Like, there'd be, things that you just would want to do but couldn't do. Like, you just can't. And anybody who lives a spiritual life, there's things all the time they want to do, but they never get to do those things. Because they don't have either the time or energy, or, their work for God is so much more important. And they have all this duty, dharma, the duty they have to do for their families and the, whatever society, but, they have to give back. You have to give back, you have to sacrifice. And some of the things that you really want to do, like Americans just, I want to do whatever I want to do. Like, I can do whatever I want to do, right? Like, that's what we all have been indoctrinated to. And you just don't have that. Like, there's, family pressures and societal pressures. And the biggest pressure is that you are working for God and, you have to do is live as a disciplined life, a very moderate life, and you can't indulge and be a pleasure seeker the way we've been trained to be, to go after pleasure and happiness in ways that that just don't exist when you're doing God's work and you're doing God's will. And the number of people who can really hear that and maybe not act on it, maybe not do anything, change anything, but realize that that's what it's going to take. Like what it'll take to turn this thing around and go in the right direction. If we're all going in the wrong direction, what does it take? And it would take drastic changes of who you are as a person, like on every level of your being, your habits, your desires, your attitude of what you are entitled to, and what the way the way that you want to be treated, and what you're willing to do, and what you're willing to spend your time and energy on, and what you're willing to do without getting anything back from other people, and how much selflessness you're willing to exhibit, how much you love other people, and all these things, how much you're willing to open up your heart and love and spread love, and regardless of whatever people do to you, right? Like if you look at like someone like Jesus, or any number of these saints in the Christian tradition, sort of there's a global tradition, but people in America would know the Christian ones. The things that they're willing to endure, the things they're willing to go through to and give to other people, and turn the other cheek and all that kind of bullshit, right? And do all that shit, and and not expect anything in return. Just doing it for the glory of God, and not in some bullshit religious way, but a heartfelt way where they feel like love for God. They just want to serve God in this way, and I mean it's a very drastic changes, and how many people can actually see that? Like how many of you it's a small percentage of people that can see, like even if you don't want it and you're not going to do it, you can see that it has. It's what should be. But, if you just look around you, you look at both political parties, you look at the media, you look at all of it, you look at the effects of the internet and cell phones, and how kids are much worse off now. And who they are is less because of their, addiction to the internet and these things, that they're weaker and they're just not as good. And we're, we've lost, character capital, who we are as people, and work ethic, and just naturally being a human being. We've lost that more and more over generation after generation. Like the onset of cable TV. I made this voiceover that's on it's on Spotify. I'm starting to put up shit there, and it's the only one of this. It's an exclusive voiceover. I talk about this, the inventions over time that were in their own way an apocalypse, right? Like regular phones. There's a world that existed before regular phones that doesn't exist now. There's a world before the automobile. There's a world before cable TV. There's a world before cell phones. There's a world before the internet. There's a world before, at some point, AI. And that world won't exist in the future. All the things that AI is going to do, all the changes that are going to be there, people will change. Look at how much people has changed and given up since coming off the farm so many years ago. All the abilities they had, people don't even know what people were capable of before they consented or were forced to work 8-hour shifts and doing a single task. Specialized labor, right? And what they've given up, what we've lost. And that was apocalypse in its own way, apocalypse in its own way. And so, these things change, and people will be changed by AI technology, just as they were changed by cell phones, just as they were changed by Facebook, just as they were changed by Twitter, or any of these number of these various whatever it is, right? These these apps or these things, and the way that people socialize and what they're no longer able to do because now the app or the AI does it for them, and so we're going to see these changes. And we already see a lot of them, and they've made each generation worse. Like all those of us, I'm 60. So I've lived through, I'm Generation X, and I lived through, I understand that I have sisters and brothers, a brother that was the boomer generation. My dad, mom were part of the greatest generation, these things. So I'm aware of those other generations. And I'm aware of even my grandfather, who was pre the greatest generation, right? And my grandmother, grandparents. And so I'm a little bit aware of what it was like for them. I mean, it's hard to, you can't really live a life where you have something they didn't have, right? And what they had to, endure, right? These things. You see the differences. And, my generation is much more sophisticated than, and the boomer generation is more sophisticated than my parents' generation and my grandparents' generations. They span a couple of generations. My grandparents were, a part of a generation that was 6 or 7 generations before or 3 or 4 generations before the so-called World War II greatest generation. And then there were some other generations during the baby boomers, the baby boomer hippies, and that lasted, there's variations in there, right? And, I understand that because I understand, not from a standpoint of how hard it was or how difficult it was or what kind of people they were, but I understand it to some extent. And I certainly understand all the changes that have come since, the 1960s and 70s when I was a kid. I saw the changes of remote control TV and color TV and cable TV and then the internet and computers and all these things. And those of us who are alive and saw the changes, kids who grew up with it, they can hear about things and kind of understand it from their parents and grandparents, but they don't get it. They don't really, they don't know what it's like to live without this stuff. And they don't know what they missed out on in terms of in the real world stuff, right? And so, in all that, you can see we're headed in the wrong direction. Our generations are getting worse. And AI and these things are just going to make people weaker and even more, incapable of being natural human beings. And so that's all there, right? And so we all see that to whatever extent. And so if we're going over the cliff and we need wholesale changes, and nobody else can tell you anything that's logical or reasonable, because the changes have to come on a spiritual level. Like God has to be involved in this, because we're talking about something, not just in terms of, this is beyond just a material problem. You can't use psychology because it's not a psychological problem alone. You can't use money or materiality because it isn't a material problem. Alone, there's material issues. There's a spiritual component and a lack of connection to divinity within people connecting to God. And their spiritual self and their intuition and these other parts of themselves that are now in a state of atrophy, right? They're not, they're dormant. And so, I think most people can understand this, and not because of some religious bullshit, because the religions themselves are materialistic and they cause the problem. And so all the things that I say about only spirituality will save this world, and, my very lengthy explanation at times, I think there'd be some number of people who could agree with that. But it's not like that's some deep truth. It's really not that hard to come to that conclusion if you have the right information and you can see things, with the way that they, that are reality based. And yet people just can't even accept that part. Just the idea that we have to change and it has to be wholesale changes and God has to be a part of it and we have to change our orientation to life. I'm not saying you act on it, but, even just accepting that. And most people, it's a complete turnoff. I think the majority of people that heard this, and as logical as it might sound, as practical as it might sound, they'll just reject it. And that's, just getting to the idea, yeah, this has to happen. It's like a person who realizes their life's falling apart and it's because of their drinking or their gambling addiction or their sex addiction or whatever. And they know it's not good. They know it's not healthy. And they can tell you that. They can't change, but at least they're willing to admit that, yeah, this needs to change. I just can't do it. And people can't even do that with what I'm saying. The majority of people can't admit that this is, yeah. In fact, they react to it in some visceral way where they want to get away from these ideas. They can't even, think about it as a possibility. And so that's what I'm talking about with this level of denial and how fucked we are, because people can't even acknowledge what should be so obvious to everybody. All right, with that, let's get into the other stuff here, or the visual proof of what I'm talking about. So here's what I'm talking about here. Today's Sunday, June 29th. This is Amy Klobuchar. Like, holy shit. bro. What's going on, bro? And she had this to say.
Make comments that are so over the top, better look in the mirror and think of the responsibility they have as civic leaders. And then the final thing is just, we need people to stand up and participate in the democracy. You would think that's not what I'd like to say today when I saw my friend gunned down by a madman.
So holy shit. She, the official story here is in Minnesota, there was two politicians, and I don't know that much about it. And they were gunned down by a madman who was also a prepper. Well, he's a madman prepper because I know very little about this story. But, there's nothing worse than a prepper. Somebody who sees that our system's like might fold like a card house and, is preparing, storing some food and such just in case there's an end of world apocalypse type of situation. It's okay to be a billionaire hoarder of wealth like Jeff Bezos and have a 500 like a $60 million wedding. That's okay. There's nothing weird about hoarding wealth and resources. But God forbid that you store a little bit of food for yourself and your family, just in case something goes south, right? But then she doubles down on this.
But actually, we need more good people to go into politics. That's what Melissa stood for.
So this is some of the stupidest shit I ever heard. You're at this woman's funeral and she's been gunned down for being a politician or her views. I mean, that's the official story. Trump is wrecking the country. You guys put Joe Biden out. You yourself got out of the way of Joe Biden, supported him, and undermined Bernie Sanders by withdrawing your presidential candidacy so that a guy with Parkinson's and prostate cancer could become president and then pave the way for a second Trump term. And you're saying good people should fucking be politicians? Like, what in what way is there a political solution? There is no political solution. What the fuck are you talking about, right? Especially on a day where you're, at a funeral where she's talking about the death of her so-called friend. And, good people who go into politics become bad people. Like it's like going into hell and then saying, we need more good people in hell, right? Where's all the good people? It was hell. Like we need more good people in hell. If you go to hell, you're going to become a bad person. I mean, whatever, hell is, but hell on earth, if you're around criminals, you go to prison, you're going to become a bad person, right? It's going to negatively affect you, even if you're innocent, especially if you're innocent, especially if you're a good person. You get dragged down. There was a kid, and I worked at these two treatment centers, and the second one I worked as a clinician. Both of them worked with kids who were sexually offended and who had acted out. The second one was for adolescent sex offenders. And there was this homeschooling kid. And I saw his family. He had a nice Christian family, homeschooling family, who were, rural people, somewhat educated, nice, like a nice wholesome family. But they were very religious, and I think he got sexually abused by a reverend or something. And then he in turn abused his sister. And, he was started to wear like rap stuff. Like he was influenced by the other kids. He was negatively influenced by the other kids. Like he was a perfect person working to get through the program, like a perfect client. He wasn't on my, it wasn't my client. It wasn't in the cottage I was in charge of, but I, saw him and knew about him. And he had a lesbian liberal therapist who was, trying to get rid of his Christianity and his family homeschooling him had nothing to do with his sexual abuse, other than the fact that it was a reverend he got, offended by, right? So he got offended sexually, and then he, did something to his sister or something. Like, the story is something like that, right? And, it had nothing to do with his family. His family was fine. Nice people, and all the other kids were great. I mean, other than, what happened to the girl and whatever effects there was that. And his therapist wasn't this lesbian woman, but she was working with him. And there was a guy who was a teacher. And this guy who was a former teacher and he was now a therapist. But he didn't have a degree in counseling, which I didn't know. And he was in charge of the victim empathy group. And he would walk up to, everyone had to go through this victim empathy group, and he would love this group. And it was a group where the client had to apologize, write an apology letter, and maybe present it if the victim was open to it. So oftentimes it was a family member or something. So to come back to the family, they had to read this apology letter, taking full responsibility for their actions, right? And he would go up to one of the kids there, any kid who had gone through his course. There's these 5 different modules, and the second one was victim empathy. The first one was the assault cycle, which I talk about often, the grooming, the series of steps the person goes through to do the sexual offense. And it could be applied to many other things. Like it starts off with a victim statement, and you go around through these various stages, right? The planning, the grooming, the act, all these things. I've talked about this, in various videos. And he ran the second group. Sometimes there'd be 2, there would be 2 modules of that, depending on where the kids were. Like if you had a lot of new kids, they were going through the first couple groups, so you need 2 people doing that group. Every Tuesday there was a group that was focused on their treatment. And he'd go up to a kid that used to be in his group and say, where's Johnny? And the kid goes, what are you talking about? And Johnny, or where's Susie? And the person that he was talking about was their victim. He goes, your victim is always with you. Weird fuck, right? The weird shit to do. The kids would be eating lunch in the cafeteria. He'd walk up, where's your victim? Like your victim's with you all the time. Like some kind of weird shit, right? And he was in charge of this kid. He was this kid who was like this, like a benchmark, like someone who just stood out as doing everything he's supposed to do. Well behaved, no issues. And I remember the therapist talking about this lesbian girl and some of these other people, talking about undermining his parents and his Christian religion and his homeschooling, which had nothing to do with his therapy. And, and I was open, my ex and I had all these kids, and we were going to do these same things. And I was like, that, you can't do that. Like, this has nothing to do with that. That's your prejudicial, view of this thing. The kid is, he's graduating this thing. He's going through the program with honors, and, he's doing everything he needs to do. And you're messing around with his family. And they were encouraging him to embrace a lot of the degraded shit. Of course, this is years and years ago. This is back in 2000, 2002, 2003. And so, and I watched them undermine this kid and try to, he started wearing rap stuff and be affected by the other kids and maybe acting out a little bit, and he was, influenced by all these, horrible fucking kids that had lived much worse lives than him, right? And, this, his therapist, so, some time goes by, this is earlier on, probably the middle part of my stay there. And then, maybe a few months before I leave, my ex has our 4th child, right? Which was a home birth, and I delivered. And there was a younger, woman, probably about 5 or 6 years younger than me, and she just had a baby around the same time. And there was a promotion that was available, and my boss wanted to give it to me, and I interviewed for it, and I'm like, she started telling me about the job, and I'm like, everything that you're asking me to do is something I suck at. Like, there's nothing here. I mean, I like more money, but I don't want to do any of this stuff. And so I basically turned it down. And she gave it to this woman, right? And I didn't really know this woman. She was fired maybe a month after I was. And I went to somehow we were talking after, it was the end of the day, just everyone else had kind of left, and we were there for some reason. And we started talking about stuff, and she was stressed out. And she started telling me that this therapist, this guy who did the victim empathy, was hitting on her he was basically stalking her in a very inappropriate way. He's always trying to get her to hug him, wrote this love letter to her. Like, she's just had a baby, she's married, and she's half his age. And she read the letter. It was the most pathetic thing I've ever heard. Like, she was like really stressed out. And her husband was like joking about it to her, like didn't take it seriously. And she went to, our boss, the woman in charge of this woman was having fucking migraine headaches so bad that she had to take morphine, or like opiates, right? Some form of morphine to deal with her migraine headaches. She was so stressed out. This place was so fucked up. And it was so hard to get people out there. And when we were down a therapist, you had to run groups of, like, every week we had a cottage group, which is 12 kids, which is way fucking too many to put in a group. And these kids hated each other and were triggered, and it was a whole nightmare. These groups were really brutal. But when there was only one therapist working, one clinician, like if we were understaffed, you'd have to run the group with 24 kids, and like 12 kids that you didn't even know because you mostly didn't know because they weren't your clients, right? Like there was cottages were split in two. There was 12 kids on each side, and so going down a clinician was unthinkable. But she didn't do anything to the guy, and she used to, I mean, she liked this. Our boss was, very much like this guy because he had been there longer than anybody, and he couldn't really go anywhere because he wasn't. He didn't have he wasn't. He shouldn't even be doing counseling. He was a teacher. He was, they put him in as a counselor, but he didn't have any background in counseling, and he was hitting on this, this new mom, right? And she was, I mean, basically telling him to stop, and he wouldn't. He was stalking her. And it turned out, like, she found out that he got fired from his last job because he sexually harassed somebody. And he's working, and he's walking up to these kids and saying, you carry your victim around with you. And he was like the exact same thing with them, but he was a fucking grown-ass man with a wife. And in his letter, he wrote about his wife was crippled and they didn't have sex anymore. And it's like, so he was, it was just fucking gross. Like it was so fucking cringy, and I'm like, you guys are telling this. So he had this client, like a dream client, somebody who did the work and was, I had a good family and a good situation to go home to. And, one of the success stories, and they want to undermine his family and his, their beliefs and these things. Right. And, he was affected by being in this treatment center, because he was now, bringing all this shit back into his family. All these fucking, sex offender, criminal kids. Some of them like were in gangs and shit. I mean, a lot of it's like a prison-like environment. And the people that work there, a lot of them were just fucking scumbags. I mean, just horrible people. And this kid who was, who got offended by some, clergy person in his church. And so then social workers get involved, right? This, stuff happens because I think they went to the, whatever. When he offended his sister, they went to the police, and the social workers couldn't wait to yank this kid out of his family because they're all liberal and prejudicial against this kind of stuff, right? And so, I'm just saying this in a way that, you take people who are good people and you put them in with fucking criminals and horrible people, they're going to go down. They're going to be degraded. It's the whole principle behind my Sajmark meditation, that you seek out people who are higher up on you in the spiritual, or more advanced than you, have gone further in their spiritual journey, and people who are just good, wholesome spiritual people. You surround yourself with those kind of people, and you emulate them, and they affect you. They pull you up. Like a great basketball player will raise the whole level of play, and a great athlete will raise the whole level of play. Everybody will play better, like both teams. Like you watch some of these, if you go to some, there's some, these parks I used to play at, basketball, pick up basketball, right? And when good players would come down to the park, the whole level of play would change. You could see it. Like they just, they lifted up the play of the other people. And that's how it works. But people who suck, they just wreck the game. You get people who can't play at all and the whole thing, and everyone's getting pissed off, and they're just like ruining it, right? And so, it's like anything else. So, this idea that you could go into the political world and somehow ennoble politics or anything, right? Anything that's been, that's been taken to a lower level is going to pull everybody down. It's going to chew up good people and turn them into bad people, spit them out as shitty people. Anyways, let's go back to it.
That's why I'm wearing green today because she loved planting trees. She loved the beauty of the world around her.
Holy fuck. Do you love planting trees? So I'm wearing green.
And that's what I hope people take from her memory, and I hope they walk right into our democracy and participate, especially young people, not away from it.
I'm so glad to hear what you've said just there, and so glad to hear everything else you've afforded us. Thank you so much.
See, to go with what I was saying in the beginning, it's not being realistic about what Washington, D.C. is or any of it, and that there's no political solution. I mean, these are the people that are out there. You see these candidates, and they're always like not real people. You look at them, you're like, these people are not real. There's like, they're just some kind of, crafted, and they're not even good at being actors and actresses, but they're, crafted by handlers and political talking points and everything that they say. Then, they never speak from the heart. And, you have somebody like Trump who comes in and just is himself, and that's just a breath of fresh air for so many people. Even being himself is being a complete scumbag grifter. But it's better than these fake people, and it's just the whole thing. The news media, and it's just all artificial. It's never real. Like, you can't identify or connect with these people. It's just everything. So then there was this one on Fox News.
An Atomic Energy Agency this morning, Rafael Grossi. U.S. and Israeli strikes caused enormous damage to Iran's nuclear sites. Don't take my word for it. How about the IDF's chief of staff?
Why would anybody take your word for it? You're a lying piece of shit. But, Joe Biden used to say the same stuff. I'm not being salacious. No, I'm serious. I'm being serious. I'm being honest now. Like, to tell the truth, this is what people say. It implies that you're a lying piece of shit, right? Don't take my word for it. Why would you do that? I'm a lying piece of shit, right? But the IDF, Israel, those guys, they never lie about anything, right?
Enormous damage to Iran's nuclear sites. Don't take my word for it. How about the IDF's chief of staff? I can say here that the assessment is that we significantly damaged the nuclear program, setting it back by years. I repeat, years. Those that understand, those that see, those that do proper assessments recognize that what the United States military did was historic.
That was Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth Thursday, calling the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities historic.
So first of all, no one's going to remember this next week. But this isn't about being damaged. It's about being obliterated. The problem here is that Trump doesn't read his intelligence briefings and doesn't listen to anybody talking about it. And if he had, he would have known that they weren't going to get all the nuclear materials and that they weren't going to set this back by years. It wasn't going to be years because, they're going to have the uranium, which is the hardest thing to acquire. And so whatever they were doing in terms of bombs and missiles and things, there might be some, whatever it is, right? But that was never the goal. And so he came out and tweeted shit that was impossible. Like, it wasn't part of the plan. The bunker buster bombs weren't going to fucking destroy every nuclear facility across the Iranian fucking country or continent. They probably don't even know all of them, where all of them are. And so when he said obliterated, and then he wanted to come out and just say, this is over with. We did it. We handled it. We're successful, when it isn't true. And Israel isn't going to stand for that shit, right? Because they want, they still want war. They still want to, they don't want this thing to end. Israel is always wanting conflict with their neighbors. They're in perpetual conflict. And they're never going to, reach any kind of real peace deal or peace accords because they don't want those things. But even if they did, Trump's bombs and his action was never going to deliver what he said it delivered. It was impossible. They didn't, all the uranium wasn't even stored in the place. They know they had more of it elsewhere. But he came out and said, it's obliterated and they'll never do it again, And that's not true, right? Like, because he didn't know what the fuck the thing could do. And this dope has to come out here and pretend that, you guys there was some damage done by these monster fucking bombs. But your dopey fucking commander-in-chief said obliterate and made claims that were impossible, right? They were physically impossible. So Twitter, the artist formerly known as Twitter, They recommend things to me every day when I turn my phone on in the morning, or look at my phone in the morning. Not necessarily turn it on, you know. And so they love to recommend Elon Musk. But I haven't seen anything since he put his tail between his legs and backed off the Jeffrey Epstein claims. But he's back at it against this big, beautiful bill. Polls show that this bill is political suicide for the Republicans. There's another tweet he posted. I don't know what that was, but you can see that orange is the stuff that people are not into. You know, and that's 60%, 59%, 57%, you know, all these things, right? People are against the big, beautiful bill. And, you know, it's going to be a disaster. Like by every, definable characteristic of a disaster, the things are going to be a nightmare. And I didn't read the bill, so, you know. But I do know that Trump didn't read the bill either. Didn't read any of it. He called it the big, beautiful bill because that's the kind of shit that Trump does, right? It's the same thing as obliterate. But it isn't Trump's bill. It's Trump people that are in Trump's circle or people who are outside Trump's circle but, you know, part of Trump's, you know, fan base or whatever it is, are pushing an agenda through this bill. And Trump is just, you know, being told this is what we're doing. And he's going along with it, and he's looking at it like it's my bill, but he didn't read it, write it, or have anything to do with it. And he and Elon Musk, you know, got into it about it. And, you know, given what we saw with the whole thing with the obliterate, you know, he's not going to back down on this bill, even if he was told it is not a Republican-type bill. It's not a, you know, it's a big spending bill. And it's going to erode freedom of speech and a lot of these other things, right? It's going to do a lot of damage. You know, I read I showed you the video where some young lady put the whole bill into ChatGPT, and it was a scathing condemnation about a dystopian type bill that will change everything in America, at least until the next 2 years, until the Democrats take hold again. And then they'll do their own set of damage, right? That's what I'm saying, that, you know, you can see it's fucked. Like everything's fucked. You know, we're heading for the cliff. And if we don't turn around, then we're going over. And, you know, it's not something where we can just let things go. We're running for the cliff, and we're following these motherfuckers over the cliff on both sides. Everybody's, you know, running towards the cliff. And it would take drastic changes to get people to start running towards the cliff on every level of society. And it starts with you. It starts with each person. But people don't want to change, right? This is what I was talking about. So then this you know, Trump added to this.
Told us that on taxes, Mr. President, could you please explain how taxes would go up by 68% if the bill isn't passed? Where does that number come from?
Well, it comes from the fact that you have automatically the Trump cuts, which were the biggest cuts that we've ever had. Now, these cuts are even bigger, but from the last administration, we had the Trump cuts. It was a 5-year deal, and it comes due. When you add that to the cuts that you already have and other things, it amounts, according to what they tell me, about 68%.
What they tell me about. That's the key thing, right? Because he doesn't know any of this shit, right? The key part of Trump's presidency came in when he said that the reporter left the chat. Remember, there's this guy got invited to a Signal chat, and people are speculating the guy was part of Assad, and he just screwed him. Like he just, you know, he was supposed to be part of the chat because he's Mossad, but he ended up screwing him. Whatever happened there. This liberal reporter got added to a Signal chat that revealed attack plans, and then he left the chat. He left he withdrew from the group, and Trump said, "I know why he withdrew. It's boring as fuck. It's boring. He got bored, and you know, if you get bored by attack plans, then you're definitely going to get bored by tax shit. You know, all of these fucking legalistic type shit, right? He doesn't read anything. So he said, right here.
Tell me about 68%.
No, right here.
Already have, and other things. It amounts, according to what they tell me, about 68%.
What they tell me about. So he's totally relying on these people to tell him what's in the bill, right? And, it's all these things are open to interpretation. So he's saying if you don't pass a bill, taxes are going to go up by 68%. They're trying to sway the public with that. But you could put out the tax cuts separately. You don't have to be a part of this bill. You just renew the tax cuts.
8%. That would mean you'd have a tax so that that the tax cuts that they got, the biggest tax cuts in our history, would immediately go up to that level. And that alone is a big chunk of the 68%.
So they tell me. I don't know. I don't read shit. That's just what they tell me. So here's the clip. ChatGTP helped me find this. It had disappeared, but but fucking ChatGTP rocks for these kind of things.
From what I heard, the man that we're talking about, who's not somebody that I don't think most people have ever heard of, he left. He found it very boring, and he left early. He got off the line very early.
See, this is another indication that Trump thinks he can just make shit up and it becomes reality when it's totally bullshit. Like this guy had this huge run, and Trump himself said that the the Atlantic, I think he writes for, is doing poorly, and not too many people go to the Atlantic. And nobody, I never heard this guy before. And Trump said, he was a very staunch Trump critic. But if you're a reporter and you get invited to a Signal chat and they start sharing classified war plans with you, that's the opposite of boring, right? I mean, the guy probably, creamed in his pants. It's the opposite of boring. And the guy had a week-long run where he was on every news program, and he, wrote a couple articles, follow-up articles, and this was his moment in the sun. This was his crowning moment. And everybody knows this. This is not, Trump says, I hear that the guy left because he was bored. The guy certainly wasn't bored. That was the opposite. And it speaks to what Trump is. Trump is always bored. Like, he's like, that shit's boring. Like, like Trump wasn't in that chat. Trump doesn't read those things, right? Trump watches Fox News and a few other things, but he gets bored with everything else. He gets bored with his intelligence briefings. He gets bored with policies. Like, he likes attention. He likes the roar of the crowd. He likes to be in front of a camera. That's exciting to Trump, right? He likes to, be the center of attention. He doesn't want to think about things and research things and learn about things and develop as a person and as a president. He just wants, the big excitements, the big reveals, right? These are things, he's like dead inside. And, and that shit's boring as hell, all that stuff on top of it. I mean, it is actually boring. The government, the running of the government, the policies and the language it's written in, the lawyerese, the language and all that shit. And so to someone like Trump, he just says, he makes a proclamation and he says, make it happen. He doesn't want to know how it works or how it happens. And he even said that, that it echoed what he said in the other clip. This is what I hear, right? This is what I hear. This is what they're telling me. Because he doesn't know anything. Like, he thinks he comes out like he's a big knower, but he takes very little information. We saw this with the Nancy Pelosi thing, in which she, not the Nancy, the Dianne Feinstein, and they had this, boardroom table meeting about gun control, and Trump was all aboard. He was like not a gun person, doesn't own them. And he was like all telling them, yeah, we'll give you this. And Dianne Feinstein had a ghoulgasm. It's like I hold this thing. I showed you guys these clips. And then somebody sent me something like that, because he didn't know about what the Republican position was. And it was giving them everything they wanted on gun control. And then he had a talking to, and they reversed his position. But, like, he doesn't know. Like, he just sits there. And the other thing was asset forfeiture. You can find these videos on the asset forfeiture video and the ghoulgasm, it says ghoulgasm in the title, where Nancy Pelosi is like, Dianne Feinstein can't believe that Trump's going to give her everything she wants on gun control, that the Democrats wouldn't even give her. And then this asset forfeiture, which is where they can just steal your stuff. Police can come in and seize your stuff. And it was being presented to him as something that they were only doing to drug dealers, but it ended up happening to him when they were investigating him, right? And then all of a sudden he didn't love it. But he was like, I can't understand why nobody would want this. And they're like, well, people think it's a civil rights violation. It's like, oh, fuck that, And so he just doesn't know anything. And he's just, he hears a little bit of information and he forms an opinion based in that when he doesn't reverse his opinion. And he says his opinion. If you don't agree with him, he gets defensive and hostile and calls you a scumbag and goes off on you. I mean, this is what Trump does. This is who he is. Okay, so I went back and found it. I always wanted to include this with a meme, and hopefully I'll do that today. I'll make a meme of it today, and then I'll have it. But first, Trump is listening to Dianne Feinstein. Well, he says, first we grab the guns. First we get the guns. Which is, I made a video about he wants to grab your guns. Because he does, he said it. No Democrat would say, first we get the guns. They would never say that, right? The NRA is very powerful, and people give a shit about their guns. And so Democrats are, you see these Democrats like Bill Clinton and these other guys out hunting and shooting guns to make everyone see that they have guns, they own guns, and they value Second Amendment even though they want to pass this gun legislation. But Trump just comes out and says it. Here, let's show you this first.
Up, and we haven't had them, and I'm talking Democrat and Republican presidents. They have not stepped up.
Mr. President, the difference is this. There's not a person in West Virginia that believes that you're not going to defend their Second Amendment rights. Not a person. With you taking a lead on something like this, it gives them the comfort that something reasonable in this.
So that's the first part, because what he says there is very important. Well, the first thing Trump says, no one else got it done, which is a huge thing for Trump. He's going to say it again up here, so I'll wait to comment. I'll comment on that there. But him saying, Joe Manchin saying that West Virginians, if it comes from you, they'll trust it. When it comes from a Republican, they'll say, all right, yeah, this guy won't grab our guns. And, Trump's going to say this thing. We'll get into it in a second, where he's going to say, first we get the guns first. But, this is like when Obama went after whistleblowers or was doing war-like things, and the Democrats were like, well, Obama wouldn't be a warmonger, so Obama's a good guy. This is the same thing. That's the dangerous part about Trump, because Trump isn't a Republican, and he doesn't give a shit about these things, and he's not thoughtful or he doesn't do research. He just takes a quick position on something, hearing very little about it, knowing almost nothing about it, and then he sticks to that position because he thinks he's God, and whatever he thinks has to be great because he's the best, right? But here he says, first we get the guns.
Conservatives.
But take the guns first, go through due process second.
Take the guns first and go through due process second. Holy shit. He actually said that shit, right? He fucking said that shit.
Conservatives.
But take the guns first, go through due process second.
So it starts off here.
Are nothing new. I asked for just a list of, you look at Columbine, Colorado, Bill Clinton was president. Virginia Tech, George Bush. Fort Hood, Sandy Hook, San Bernardino, Pulse Nightclub, and so many more.
So one of the things that, Trump loves is his signature personality trait. You hear him say it all the time about Joe Biden couldn't get it done. No president in history has gotten this done. These things, he loves to do things other people can't or wouldn't have done, right? Or they couldn't do. There was a time when Trump was really popular. He went on David Letterman, and David Letterman was gushing over the guy because Trump took over the Central Park had an ice skating rink, and these people had butchered it and did a horrible job. And Trump somehow came in. This is a young Trump, right? Like 40 years ago. And Trump came in and with whatever Trump was doing, and he was able to do it at a lower cost to the city. And he took on this project, and David Letterman was praising him for, saving the ice skating rink, right? This iconic thing in Central Park. And Trump loves that shit, being able to do things cheaper and better and faster, Operation Warp Speed. And they say it'll take 2 years and I can do it in 6 months. That's Trump stuff. No other president's ever been able to do this. And so all you have to do is say, all these other presidents failed, but none of them could do it. And Trump will immediately try to do that, especially in his first term, when he really wanted to prove himself to everybody. And so he's doing this with gun control because he doesn't give a shit about the political ramifications. He just cares about everyone going, hey, Trump did something no one else could do, because that's his big thing. You can see it because he talks about it all the time.
It's ridiculous. but maybe we could make it much more comprehensive and have one bill instead of 15 different bills that nobody knows what's happening.
If we can get 60 votes for it, Mr. President,
I think
I'm all
you can.
for it.
Honestly, I think, look, I really believe this is one of the things where you can actually get the 60 votes and maybe easily. Diane, do you have something?
Well, I do, Mr. President. You probably know this, but I became mayor of San Francisco as a product of assassination. I've been
Yeah.
the victim of terrorist groups. The department gave me a weapon. They taught me how to shoot it, and we proceeded through the 1970s that way. What I've watched and seen is the development of weapons that I never thought would leave the battlefield, that are out on our streets. And the latest and newest, Mr. Chairman, is the AR-15.
Kaboom.
It's got a lot of assets to it, and it's misused. And it tears apart a human body with the velocity. And I've watched the school shootings in particular, which you pointed out. And I thought Sandy Hook, and I'm delighted that Senator Murphy is here today. We thought Sandy Hook would be the end, and he and I introduced another assault weapons bill after the first one. We didn't succeed with it, but the killings have gone on, the number of incidents have gone up.
Okay, so it goes on. She talks about this quite a bit, and this is, I'm just giving her some framework. So Trump then gives her a ghoulgasm here.
That is more than we lost the brave troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so just doing something on this background check issue and using that as a base, and then I would like to add some of these other things we've talked about, I think would make a major difference.
So if you could add that to this bill, that would be great, Diane. If you could add what you have also, and I think you can, into the bill.
Yeah. Joe, are you ready?
Can you do that, Joe?
That was the ghoulgasm that I spoke of, right? I found it. I was looking through, I was trying to find the Joe Manchin thing, which I think is coming up here. But this is the ghoulgasm. Watch it again. She says she wants Diane Goulstein's stuff to go into the bill. And, you know, remember she died with $110 million worth of assets and all that stuff.
I think would make a major difference.
So if you could add that to this bill, that would be great, Diane. If you could add what you have also, and I think you can, into the bill.
Yeah. Joe, are you ready?
Can you do that? Joe, can you do that? Pat, can you add some of the things? You're not going to agree with me.
If you help.
Well, no, I'll help, but can you add what Amy and what Diane have? Can we add them in? And I know you can add what John has.
So, you know, I call this Dianne Feinstein having a ghoulgasm. And I searched ghoulgasm all over the place. I don't know how I would spell it, but I didn't put it in the video. I didn't put it in the title of the video, and it took me forever to find this. I was lucky enough to find it. And I couldn't find it. You know, I looked for it for a while. It was a news report that I had seen years and years ago when this came out. Now, I'm not going to cover the asset forfeiture. That was, you know, similar, where Trump did the exact same thing on the asset forfeiture. But this is who Trump is, right? And, you know, this is just how he is. And, like, these things you can look up, the asset forfeiture whole video's up there on YouTube somewhere, where Trump doesn't hear anything, but his ego's so big on being the best and the fastest and doing it better than everybody else, and he knows better and I'm no better, and then I know better than everybody else, and he knows almost no information or the political ramifications, and he's just, you know, giving all this stuff to, you know, I mean, this poor lady, this poor Dianne Feinstein, you know, who wasn't going to be much longer for this world, and she thinks she's finally going to get it, and, you know, he gets her all, like, worked up here, and then he gets told, you know, yeah, that's not what we do as Republicans, and he drops the whole thing. But this just shows Trump, who Trump is as a person and his psychological makeup, and he's not a believer. He just does whatever he thinks is going to make him look good or what's going to profit him or whatever, because he's just one of the purely narcissistic people, like just a pure narcissist. So I'm not sure how much you can change the events in your life or the worldly events. A lot of the stuff is scripted. It's stuff that's going to happen. It's ordained by God. You know, it's part of a divine plan. Like, I don't know how much freedom of choice plays out in when something happening or not happening. But I do know what you do internally is epically important in terms of your freedom of choice, like how you feel about something when it's happening. And to go with that, everybody has life issues, issues of things that you have to change. Maybe you're too stubborn. Maybe you're closed-hearted. Maybe you're not affectionate enough. Maybe you're too hateful, or hateful. Like, I don't only think you need a two there. Maybe you have phobias, you have addictions, right? These some scars that I've talked about. And so you come in to life and you have these things you have to get rid of. Things that you've formed in past lives or tendencies you've had. And it's a challenge. It's something that, you're going to get feedback from the divine forces, the divine, consciousness that's there, and your own, experience, your soul, that things are going to come to you showing you what you have to change. This is for everybody. And unfortunately, people, instead of changing what they have to change, embrace what they should be changing. And so for Donald Trump, it's his arrogance, it's his desire to do things better than other people, even if but he doesn't work hard. Like, he's not somebody who works really hard at being a good president. He doesn't work assiduously to try to improve himself. He doesn't try to improve himself at all. Like, he doesn't think he has to change at all, right? And so he is the prototypical example of how not to live your life. Because he's getting feedback, this latest thing that's happened with him using the word obliterate. Using the word obliterate just messed up the whole, everything. And then to come out and lie about it and make it about how you're going after the pilots in some manipulative, you're screwing the troops over a way that's not true at all and just icky. Instead of realizing, hey, I got to stop fucking making shit up and bragging about shit. Because bragging is just, it might serve him to the weak-minded people that need you to tell them how great they are or how great you are, right? There are people that really respond when somebody else comes up and says, hey, I'm really great. And they're like, oh, you're really great? Great, I'll follow you. You're great. Oh, you're great. Well, that's great. But to the majority of people, most people are like, oh my God, this person fucking brags all the time. Why is such a fucking bragger? Why are you bragging, bragger? Stop bragging, bragger. And so people are off-put by bragging. And, people who are telling you how great they are or need to be told how great they are believe something else internally. They think they're not great, or they're covering something up, or they're denying something. And so there's some insecurity, some narcissistic wounding there. And so those people have real difficulty changing. Anybody with access to personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and there's a number of other diagnoses where people have hard time changing. They have hard time receiving feedback. And when they do feel that something is exposing something inside them that's flawed, instead of getting rid of what's flawed, right, and then they'll feel better. You'll feel secure about yourself. You won't have this, this niggling, this idea that something is wrong with you, that you're trying to hide from other people. But you accept that there's something in there that, you have to get rid of, this belief, this attitude that you have. And it's being pulled out to the surface. And instead of embracing this activity as something that's better for you, you push back against it and actually lean into your flaws, right? You want to keep your flaws. And that's what Trump does in these people. I mean, all these people, Trump particularly. I mean, every day they're getting told, hey, you got to change. Divinity works. And everybody has fair warning. Everybody's being communicated with. Everybody's getting feedback. Everyone's getting, you don't come down here with an issue that's not going to be brought to the surface and giving you a chance to get rid of it. But if then you lean into it, you make it even worse, you make it even stronger, and then you come back in your next existence with some scars, these things that have formed on your soul, these etheric impressions. If they get worse every life, and then it gets to the point that you can't even think about changing it. It's become like stone-like. To clean it off takes a Herculean effort, right? But the big thing is to realize that you have to change. And that's why I, rag on these people and talk about them so much, because they're being told, they know, like Trump knows, and all he had to do is say, you know what, I don't read the fucking briefings. I don't know what the fuck's going on. And I'm making proclamations that I have no information about. And then you got a media, and I've pissed everybody off because I do shit like that. And I've said, stupid things, did crazy things, and I'm obnoxious, and I am insulting, and I do all these things to them. Why don't I work on that a little bit? Why don't I work to becoming a better president? Why don't I invest my time and energy into getting a solid knowledge base and make thoughtful decisions and bring in people that just aren't here to taint lickers, get real people that are going to challenge me and, give alternate points of view. And so, but it's the opposite of that. And so that's why this thing is so bad right now. And this is across the board. It's not just Trump. I mean, Joe Biden was the same way, obviously. And he was, going south. He was going south in terms of his cognitive functioning. And so, this is the paramount thing is that people realize you have things to change. You have things inside you that need to be removed and need to be, strengthened, or something else needs to take its place and something better. The things that your weaknesses need to be strengthened, and you need to, improve in some way. There has to be some improvement about what's going on the inside. And when you do that, then some of the consequences that are there for your arrogance are going to either be lessened or disappear altogether, and you can move on to something else. But Trump just keeps on doubling down and leaning into his flaws. And, it's just a bad example of what to be as a human being, and all these people are embracing it. The WWF stuff and the bragging and when somebody exposes a flaw that you have, instead of embracing, acknowledging that the person's telling you the truth, you go and you attack them, right? You're thinking that it's some kind of war between other people, but they're actually exposing something. This is the seventh maxim in the Sajmark system, that these people that look like enemies, that look like haters, look like, people that are trying to do you harm, are actually pulling things out inside of you that are you're negative and blocking your spiritual evolution, and they're doing you a disservice. So the maxim is, be not revengeful for the wrongs done by others. Take them as heavenly gifts and be thankful. Because, they are. And I've read the write-up about that. It's brilliantly written in a spiritual science type of way. But, God wants you in your purest, pristine, innocent form, and wants to get rid of all these, perversions of your personality and ego and things that have become not a reflection of you as you at your highest, as the soul within you, at your purest form. And so anything that's not in line with those things has to be removed. And so things come in your way and help you get rid of this stuff. And oftentimes it's an unpleasant thing. But, people just aren't there yet. Or maybe they never will be, because it's a hard thing to do, especially when everyone's so internally fragile. So, when the consequences come, one of the things is we're pushing the consequences down or back or, into the future. And they build the momentum. It's like a snowball rolling down the hill. And also, we're not doing anything to mitigate the consequences that inevitably are going to come our way. And so instead of being something mild that we can get through, they're going to be, of like a knockout blow or, of a catastrophic nature. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely important for the apocalypse. And the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.